Looks like we've got people joining in literally all over the world, which is fantastic.
Yeah. So just give us 1 minute real quick, guys. So glad to see people tuning in from different places. I see Manish from India, Sevilla from Spain, Alexander from Poland, Mane from Armenia. Hey everyone, Sumit from Dallas. All right, so I have enabled it on the live streaming on YouTube now, so we are good to go pretty much. Just give me one real quick second. And yeah, so I believe, James, you're the one who's presenting, right?
I am indeed, yes.
Perfect. Okay,
right.
So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone who has joined us in, and welcome to another Lambda Test webinar. In this webinar, we are going to talk about how you can implement BDD testing like a pro automation tester. And BDD testing has been quite a debatable topic, and a buzzword at the same time from quite some time now, where some QA teams find it questionable to spend their time and bandwidth in writing BDD test scripts as a part of their process, while others are pretty adamant about having it in their test automation approach right from the scratch. And while I believe a majority of you would fall into the latter category, where you would prefer to have BDD right from the get-go, even if you're not aware of what BDD is, you're at the right place. We're going to talk about how to write BDD and how to implement it in great detail during this webinar, and I have the experts with me. And in case you already know what BDD is, how it benefits, this webinar is going to add on to your existing setup. You can figure out how to make it a part of your continuous testing pipeline, how to elevate your existing testing setup with the help of our speakers. So James, if you could just go to the next slide, I can welcome you and Ryan. Yeah, so I'm Harshit Paul. I manage product and growth at Lambda Test, and I'll be the host for this webinar. With me, I have Ryan Thornton and James Bent. Ryan is head of product marketing at Virtuoso, and James on the other end is the head of sales engineering. So by all means, Ryan, James, feel free to introduce yourselves to the audience.
Yeah, really good to be talking with you all. So Ryan and me, we're going to be doing a bit of a tag team as well as Harshit. So we're going to be really sort of pleased to take you both through how you can, firstly, Ryan will sort of take you across BDDs, then I'll be talking about Virtuoso as a platform for writing automated tests, and Harshit will be talking about Lambda Test. I've been with Virtuoso about 8 or 9 months now, really enjoying being here, but also talking to people about how the platform can really aid automation, especially using things like BDD. So really looking forward to it. Thank you.
Ryan, you're on mute.
It's been a bit of a whirlwind today. Work for a tech company, can't join a webinar. So I've been working at Virtuoso for a little over 12 months now, but I've worked in the test automation space for quite some years. And as I introduce BDD, I'll be introducing a little bit of my story and how I came to understand it. So I don't want to peak too early and take anything away from that.
Awesome. Thank you so much for making time out of your busy schedule. It's great having you two here, and I'm sure the audience is excited about the same as well. So we'll get to today's agenda, but before we deep dive into that, let me quickly cover a few housekeeping items. This webinar is going to be an hour and a half long. So in case you need to drop off in between, do not worry. We have this recorded, and the entire recording will be sent to your email addresses, registered email addresses. You can also find the full recording of this webinar over our YouTube channel. And you could also find recording of our previous webinars over our YouTube channel. And in case you're not already subscribed to Lambda Test, make sure that you go ahead and do it, because we release a lot of videos around test automation space or testing in general. And having said that, we would love to hear from you. This is an open-ended session. So in case while we're presenting and you have any questions, thoughts, suggestions, anything, feel free to drop them in the chat box, and we'll try to pick them towards the end, where we have a dedicated Q&A round, where we'll be answering to as many questions as we can. Having said that, as we can hop into today's agenda, we'll be diving deep into right from the beginning as to what is BDD and how you can write the most testable BDD requirements, how you can cover them into your test suites. and make them fully executable on the basis of your testing requirements. We will see how you can integrate them with your CI/CD pipelines in order to implement continuous testing, how you can run the tests using Lambda tests the moment you commit a code using the CI/CD pipelines. And I will take over a Lambda test platform demo where I'll be covering the platform in some detail. Yeah. All right, James, all yours.
Okay, so from one good agenda deserves another. Hello, good evening, good afternoon, good morning, and welcome to my section, which is an introduction to BDD, looking at current adoption, places that it may or may not all go wrong, and seeing, I suppose, with the advent of new technologies, machine learning, how a new dawn is capable. Have a look at the kind of syntax that we have. Gherkin is often referred to, and seeing how you can create that before an app is created. And ensuring, no problem, ensuring and seeing how we can now ensure adoption throughout the life cycle. It's fine, Hashid. I just thought my wife was telling me off for something there for a second. It made me jump. And we have a meme here. BDD is really ties the team together. I think my tongue's kind of in my cheek when I say that, because it's not necessarily a positive thing. I think it's better to say that BDD offers the potential to tie the team together in a positive way. But it's got to be done right, and it's got to harness the latest technology to do so, I think would be fair to say. Which brings me neatly to the next slide. Okay, so we're looking at why we do all this. So why do we adopt Agile or CI/CD or continuous testing or indeed adopt BDD? These are all methodologies and even before the Agile Manifesto, adopting methodologies because we needed to deal with this stark, often touted graph. It's from IBM. I'm sure many of you have seen it, probably from people trying to sell you testing tools to show you the ROI on why that tool is fantastic. But simply, it's a lot cheaper to find bugs early. The usual, or one of the more interesting examples, is when NASA lost a fair bit of money when their bug was found during the Mars orbiter being in production. They'd mixed up their metric and imperial measurements, causing it to burn up in the planet's atmosphere. And this is just finding the bug. What I think is kind of powerful when done right about BDD is that not only are you finding out about that you've built something that works, you know, and it's a quality thing. You've built it in the right way. You also ensure that you've built the right thing, and I think that's somewhere that's really interesting. We'll touch on. So if we can move to the next slide. Okay, so before I got into test automation a fair few years ago, when the children were younger, I was a stay-at-home dad. Told you I'd tell you the story. And one day my wife pointed out that it was probably time for me to stop hanging out with the yoga mums and get back into the world of work. So I did, and started working in test automation, looking at content, kind of thought leadership stuff, and how to work with teams, agile, etc., etc. And I remember saying to my my boss at the time, this is very much what me and the yoga mums used to talk about. But instead of having team, we'd use the word children, you know. Make sure that you communicate with each other. Make sure that you have understanding when you're talking and all these kind of things. But honestly, it is kind of it is very much the same, and I think it is good to go to back to that kind of basics, because that is kind of what BDD is. It's just about a way of communicating. Dan North, who came up with it. It's using examples to talk through how an application behaves and having conversation about those examples. So the point of that story is this is just a 101 that I'm giving, and it's probably an oversimplification, but I make no apologies about that, because it is kind of about simplifying the complex. That's kind of what we're wanting to do. And if we look on the right, we see this business bot. He's got a fantastic idea. He's done all the maths. He's found the demand. It's all great. The bad news is he doesn't know how to code. So what does he do? He has to go and speak to an engineer. And business bots and engineer bots don't necessarily speak the same language. And BDD is about finding a common language, which is what we'll go on to in the next slide. So BDD, it originated from TDD, which the meme on the left kind of suggests, and really, I think it's probably, though I'm sure there's a lot of debate here as whether it is. It's part of that process. It's an offshoot from it. Its key features are shared processes and shared tools, which is nice. But developer tools tend to be developer tools. An example that doesn't really fit, but I think is quite interesting. I've used GitHub for a projects board for this, because our dev team use it. So it's nice for marketing to have that. We can go in and work with the docs, and we can really get aligned. But then you get somebody from a more marketing background, and it doesn't look as pretty as Monday.com. Or one of the other tools. So we end up going with one of those because it's, not a dev tool. And then we want to promote communication between the three amigos. The three amigos being product or business interest, development, and testing. And it's about establishing what the system should and should not do. And you know, how does the system behave? Let's understand how it should behave and test to see that it does behave like that. And between these three amigos, we need to get better readability and visibility, so that you can't just hide behind code, or devs can't just hide behind code. And I'll come back to this a lot because it's a favorite saying of mine. It's don't just build the right way, build the right thing. Build the right thing in the right way. And it ensures, if done properly, it should ensure that that business bot we saw in the last slide gets delivered the right app that he's asked for. Which brings us to the next one, James. So requirements are king in this situation. We know that the cost rises if you don't build the right thing throughout the development life cycle and beyond. The development is based upon these requirements. Now these requirements need to be testable, and that's one of the problems about implementing BDD, is that often the requirements aren't testable, and it's only once development started that one realizes that. The testing framework itself needs to be based upon these requirements. So again, you need to get a lot of shifting left here to start thinking about all these things very early on. And that focus is throughout the SDLC. Have I built the right thing? Does what I'm building meet the requirements that were initially set? And we do that through testing, which brings us to slide 8. And the way we do this, I mean, there's a few, but this is probably an oversimplification. I'm sure that anybody who's well versed in this will possibly object, but let's just keep a broad brush here. So it's about human readable language. It's often referred to as gherkin syntax, but it's about specifications following a similar structure, and there's kind of established ways of doing that. QA can or should be able to test against this syntax, but the challenge is writing good syntax that can be tested against. There's also another challenge which we'll come on in more detail later, and that is that with a lot of traditional tools, taking that gherkin syntax and putting those requirements against your code does take developer time and is using developer tools, which means that the product and testing amigos are kind of away from that and are dependent upon the developer, which brings us to slide 9. Oh, and I didn't mention the awful meme that I had there, so we'll gloss over that. So how does this look in reality? We've got a BDD cycle on the side. This readable language is used to write specification. That's done generally by product owners and devs. The product owner specifies the behaviors they expect from the system. Developers fill these specifications with behaviors. Testers create a framework to test these behaviors. The product is developed and the product is tested against the requirements. We've got that cycle. All seems fantastic in theory. How does this work in reality? Which brings us to slide 10. So in theory, this is fantastic. It runs across that entire cycle and we get requirements being king throughout. Testing framework set up earlier. Wonderful. BDD projects typically run 50% more efficient with 50% more efficiency, which is state of testing survey. But implementation at the minute is often sporadic. All the 3 amigos are not always involved. And the answer to that is it's not that easy to implement. Some of the problems that I've witnessed are poorly written syntax, which means they're not able to test against them. The one I touched on earlier, the fact that it often needs a lot of developer tools. So then there's one friend who's more of an amigo than the other 2. Is kind of another problem, which brings us into the state that I think in number 11 we can say we're at, and that is, given BDD is more efficient, then it should be implemented across the SDLC. When? Well, James, because he's the sales engineer, is here to tell you now. So if we move on to the next slide, and I'll give an introduction as to why I genuinely think that is true. So we're now able to use technology to ensure that requirements are testable. We can use AI to create a test structure from requirements, and we can build tests using natural language. So if you imagine a manual test script, is not so far removed from what you can do with requirements with a human. If you can do that with AI, then we're in a situation where we can automate. And not only can we automate, we can do it using the skills, the technical skills, which business interests and non-coding testers can do. And it's scalable, which means we can run tests the second code is sent to commit, which means that we don't have that backlog that's usually, or bottleneck should I say, that's usually associated. And because we're using natural language across the testing cycle, we are able to receive human readable reports on requirements coverage, quality of the product, and again, you know you've built the right thing in the right way. So that's the marketing waffle, and I hope that on that last slide, and I hope that the previous slides were a good 101 as an introduction and the current state, as I pass over to my friend and colleague, Mr. James Bent.
Thank you very much, Ryan. And you might call it marketing waffle, but I think it's incredibly relevant, and I think it's really great to have gone over that, because while we'll get to the I'll call it the fun stuff, and actually getting to look at the platforms both at Virtuoso and Lambda Test and how you actually implement that, I mean, it is really, really important to kind of really think about actually, why would we do this? What's the benefits? And actually, how can you also shift to creating really great BDDs to facilitate this? So, but that said, I will get into the fun stuff now, which is showing the platform. So let me share my screen again, just 1 second. So what we're actually going to be showing you as we do this is we're going to be taking you through, definitely a demonstration of how you can actually take BDDs and create automated tests, even at, let's say, the planning stage. So really talk about how use the BDDs as early as the planning stage. This can be the tester working alongside the product owner, the business owner, but also linking into the developer to be able to author codeless tests from BDDs. Have it such that that's done either at the planning or maybe in sprint as the features are being developed, also referring back to the BDD requirements to make sure the build reflects the actual design, such that you have automated tests ready to run through CI/CD pipelines, so you can execute immediately as the code is released, and how Virtuoso enables you to author, but then also we'll show you how we integrate into Lambda Test to ensure that then you can execute across any web browser, any operating system, be able to immediately view how those tests are running. And Harshit's going to do a great job of showing how Lambda Test and the great capabilities there will do so. And then how you can then further test both on looking at what, particularly in Virtuoso, we're surfacing around elements, around the test reports, but also things like if there are bugs, how we provide inputs to the developers to be able to get things fixed really easily, but also how in Virtuoso we help self-maintain tests. So even though it's automation, if you've got dynamic elements like IDs, XPaths, and so on, how we self-heal those. And then we're really going to be looking about things like sort of traceability and coverage against those requirements to make sure that, as Ryan was mentioning, you build the right thing in the right way, because it all starts from the BDDs. So look, let's actually get into that. And, I've got a few things here I prepared earlier. One is I've got some BDD requirements, which, we put together for a simple test to go to an e-commerce store to basically, it shows me already I can read from the requirements. So product has specified, we're going to go to an e-commerce store, choose a product, which is going to be a tote bag, which we're going to check a particular product's on page before adding to the basket, go to the shopping bag. And then once in the checkout, I'm going to assert the quantity. So check that works, go through to the checkout and start filling a form. The BDDs are written such that as a tester, as a product owner, I know what's going to be built, but also what needs to be tested. But then as a developer, these should be written in a standardized way that actually you can go through a flow and see from a development perspective, I should be able to understand what is it I'm going to build. So fantastic. So how does that work? So number one, here is Virtuoso. So we are a SaaS application, much like Lambda Test. We're browser-based. What we'll talk about a bit is it's so easy for you to get on board with both Virtuoso and Lambda Test and get them integrated immediately, start writing your tests and execute and report on them immediately. So after the call, we'll be expecting you to do so. So in Virtuoso, you will have an organization in which then you can create projects, and we'll show you how to do that in just a minute. So you can have different projects against different platforms or clients. But before we do that, of course, we're also going to be talking about Lambda Test. And so what we're going to show you first of all is, of course, you get signed up to both of them, but then how do you get them integrated? So you can make sure that when you execute tests, Virtuoso will link into Lambda Test, and you can benefit from all the fantastic Lambda Test features for executing on different operating systems and devices. So number one, here's my Lambda test instance, and simply all I've got to do is go to my profile. I then grab my access token, which I've generated, so I can copy that. Then all I do, having done that, is come into Virtuoso, and I'm just in the background, just grabbing my token, there we go. So come into Virtuoso, and in my organization settings, I now have the option to set up a custom grid, which I'm of course going to choose Lambda test. We're going to set to have parallelism. So I'm going to set to run up to 3 tests in parallel, and we'll show you what this means when you execute tests. I put in my URL to set up the grid, submit that, and in just a minute or so, where basically the platforms are going to be integrated. And as soon as I've written my test, I can start executing from the Virtuoso tests on Lambda test immediately. So number one, we've got our BDDs written. So fantastic, that's my start point. I want to start writing tests. So now let's go ahead and create a new project, which is going to be my Lambda test Virtuoso webinar project. Fantastic. So let's create that. So the project is effectively, that's going to be your container for all of your regression packs, your test plans, and then the underlying tests. And you can have as many projects as you like in Virtuoso. So what I want to do first is I'm going to create my first testing goal, which is going to be my regression pack. So let's go ahead and create a goal. So let's say that this is my regression pack, which I'm going to do on my e-commerce store, which has been specified nicely here in my BDD. That's what we should call it. So let's use that as my starting point. And I'll go ahead and create my journey. Now, what's a journey? In Virtuoso, we call tests journeys because since you're writing in natural language, you can actually start writing more user-focused, workflow-based end-to-end tests that emulate how a user accesses instead of, let's say, doing feature-based tests. And this can actually be reflected in the way you write your BDDs as well. So write more sort of end-to-end workflows that emulate how a user tests. But look, I've set up my first journey here. Let's go back to the project dashboard, because now what I want to do, I want to leverage those BDD requirements. So if I come into my project and my requirements, I can now take my BDDs and I can import them. So let's just do that. So let's take my BDDs. There we go. Let's drag and drop them. And let's import those into Virtuoso, which is done. Fantastic. So those same BDDs, as you can see, have now been imported. They've been set out in the structure of the feature, the scenarios. And what this then means is that number one, I've got my requirements in Virtuoso, which we're going to look at how then you can do things like coverage and traceability. But actually as a tester, thinking again, I'm at the planning stage. So my product owner, my designer, they've given me the BDD requirements. The developer may not have started yet. You know, this is actually at the planning stage. What I can do is take the BDDs and generate the framework of my test, my journey, using the BDD requirements, which I'm going to do just now. So I'm going to set up, I'm going to generate, which has successfully generated my journey using requirements. And by clicking here, firstly, it's mapped my requirements to a particular journey. So I've got coverage. They're embedded into a journey. When I do go into that journey, I've now got it set up. We're creating checkpoints which map to the scenarios. I've got all the requirements embedded. And as a tester, I can now start using natural language to be able to write test steps based on the BDDs. So for example, my first action is to write tote bag in search. So literally here, I can add a step and say, write tote bag in search. So we're using plain English syntax, and we'll talk about the sort of range of syntax you can actually facilitate with Virtuoso. It's actually incredibly powerful while being simple. Write the data, so the element, the value I want to have into the field, which is going to be called search, which also the developer should be able to refer to and say, I need to make a search field. I need to check that gone testing tote bag is available. So this is an assertion. I need to check something. Let's look for the gone testing. So I'm basically doing an assertion based on the presence of gone testing being available. I'm going to click to add to bag. So let's add that into the bag. And then I'm going to click into the shopping bag icon. So already I haven't had a minute. The developer hasn't even started developing yet. I haven't had to learn XPath or JavaScript or code. I haven't had to wait for the application to be released. I've started writing at the planning stage, usable automation, leveraging the BDD, where now, because I'm doing so, my test steps should be valid because they link back to the requirement, not the development, even though they will eventually test the development. Let's go on and write a few more steps, because here I've now got to make an actual assertion. So quantity needs to meet the value 1. So let's say assert that the quantity, if I can actually type, which is also sometimes a challenge, equals, and the expected value is 1. So now, even though it's natural language, I can do assertions, which is absolutely fantastic. I'm then going to click go to checkout, just as the requirement is telling me. And they note how I've got these all contained in separate checkpoints. So basically, I'm testing each of the BDD scenarios separately, so I can segment them out. And note I did actually just do a typo there, so I can easily just go and update that. So go to checkout, fantastic. And then here I'm going to write my email in the email box. So let's write james.b@virtuoso.qa, which, by the way, anybody is welcome to email me at after the session if you want to know more. That's fantastic. And then I've got a final couple of steps, which are to say, write my full name in the full name box. So let's write James B in full name. And you can see how quick this is. I mean, I'm literally just writing, and this is going to be usable automation. We're going to execute this in a minute. And you're going to see actually there's no latency in terms of being able to just use this immediately to run an automated test as soon as the code is ready, and couldn't be able to execute on Lambda test. So actually, I'm done. I've now written my automated test against the BDDs. I didn't even have to look. I didn't have to ask the developer. I didn't have to look at the application. I've totally used the BDD, which really goes back to that point. Write great BDD, and you can actually be really efficient, because now my test's ready. Instead of having to wait for the code to be done and then asking the developer or the product owner, what should I build a test on? I've done it, even maybe before the developer started working. But you can actually do more than this, because I actually use data where I wrote hard values in here. Well, guess what? I can come in and set up test data. So I could say, actually, why don't I create a data table so I can use different customer details? Because actually, why don't, when I'm ready, run this test in parallel with different data sets? So let's say these are different customers. So I could create my table, which I could upload a CSV file. Let's just do this based on name and email, for example. So we're going to have one of the values going to be James at Virtuoso. In fact, that's my email, so let's put it in the right box. Then let's have Harshit, and let's have also Ryan, and let's say Harshit at lambdatest.com and Ryan at virtuoso.qa. So now what I'm doing is creating a data table. I've got variable data that I've defined the parameters. I've set up my test data. And now I can save that. So that's great. I've got my customers. And now I can come back to the test I was writing, and I can come and choose to manage test data, choose the table I've created and map that in to say, instead of writing just the hard value once, I could map in name goes here and email address is going to go in here. I'm mapping my test data into my test. Again, this is development's not even started yet. And yet I'm creating a scalable test with test data that I can test from different scenarios. Automation is absolutely fantastic. To give you an idea, just if I come to our documentation, and I'm sure Harshit will refer to sort of all the great guides that Lambda Test has as well, but this will sort of speak to how easy this is, but also how you can get support to be able to understand how to write tests. It's really easy to onboard. You can see the sort of range of interactions you can perform with natural language, whether it's clicking an item, writing in a box, selecting from a dropdown, switching between frames or tabs, or scrolling, uploading files, or indeed things like assertions to be able to assert from all different aspects. And in fact, if you really wanted to, well, that's going to cover like 90%, 95%. You can also extend Virtuoso out if you want to run a real sort of little edge case by writing a little JavaScript rule. And if you know JavaScript, which I'm not really going to claim to too well, but you could basically create a little JavaScript rule and execute that as part of your test as well. And guess what? You can embed that again against the BDD before the test is ready to run. So hopefully you're starting to get an idea from BDDs how easy it is to author automation, and we will, including things like test data. But I guess the really key thing then is now actually we're ready to run this. So we want to do exactly that. And we want to see, we've already plugged it into Lambda test in the background. So it's going to, when we execute, this is going to run. But I guess the other thing to sort of think is the fact that we hook into pipelines. So whether it's Azure DevOps, Jenkins, TeamCity, Circle, any of them really, you can plug it into pipelines by way of a bash script you put into your job so that you've got your automated script ready. You can build out all your tests for your regression pack. You then make sure you're hooked into the pipeline, which takes about 5 minutes to get this set up so that when the development has completed, which should refer back to the BDDs, so developers should also be building in the frame of the three amigos, product, dev, and testers align, such that when they upload their code, they can immediately execute the Virtuoso goal, the regression pack, which contains all your automated tests. The great thing as well is that you can execute tests in parallel. So it means that if you have two tests, and I'm actually going to branch a test off of here just to create my parallel test. Here we go. Just so I've got actually 3 tests in here. So actually what we're going to see is the fact that if I come back to my goal view, my regression pack, let's say I've authored my 3 tests. This is the one we're running just now. I can actually choose all of them. So I'm going to say I want to execute all of these tests. And now we get into the fun stuff, which is to say, when I want to execute these, firstly, I can do it in parallel. So we're on AWS, we scale fantastically, so you can run pretty much as many tests as you like. And obviously that matches into the sort of plan you've got with Lambda tests for parallels. You can limit that down. So if I just say I only want to run 5 at a time, you can basically run tests in parallel. It literally means when we execute this, we will be running the tests at the same time. So from a scalability perspective, particularly against manual testing, automation can run 10, 50, 100 tests in parallel with different test data sets as well. So I could actually set as well to say, because I set up some test data, I want to run this with test data. I put 3 scenarios. So we're going to execute that test 3 times with the different test data sets. And now when I come down here as well, I can choose, I'll just refresh here. And this is the famous demo last words in terms of, hopefully I've set up the configuration correctly, which I have. Fantastic. There we go. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to do this on Windows 10. I'm going to do it on Edge, and I'm going to choose, just to be cheeky, version 88. There we go. Just so we can see when we execute on Lambda test that we are using those options. And let's check the test data as well. So here's the moment of truth. Developer has just done their code. They're uploading. The tester's written a test against the BDD, the product owner, writ. Virtuoso has been integrated into Lambda test. And so imagine this is running from the pipeline. We click execute. And when we come into Lambda test, look at that. We've got 2 tests running because I've only got 2 in parallel on my plan. So we're running 2 of those tests, version 88 of Edge on Windows 10. Fantastic. So we click into there. We could even watch it running. I love this feature with Lambda test for being able to watch the video playing. Okay, great demo. There you go. That's probably more. Well, I'm sure Harshit, you can look over that. That's probably my internet, but that's fine. But what we're doing here is we are running the tests on Lambda test. We can see when they're completed and the ones that are queuing, the ones that are going to run. So basically, we've just executed our automated tests written in plain English from BDDs as soon as development's complete. So at that point, Harshit, I may hand to you, because if you take the segment now and sort of at that execution, the great things Lambda test can do before we come back to Virtuoso to look at actually what more we can see from reporting and maintenance and requirement coverage. So I'll stop sharing and hand over to you, Harshit.
Thank you so much, James. That was really insightful. And I have to say, I'm pretty impressed with everything that you can do with Virtuoso. I mean, I was just mesmerized by the fact that you were just inserting values like in plain English, and it was autofilling based upon the values that you were trying to put in. And hats off to Ryan, by the way. I loved the entire analogy, and the PPT was actually, I would say it was pretty amusing to me, and I'm sure the audience would be feeling the same way. So yeah, let's hop into Lambda test dashboard now. And thanks for setting up the base. James has already taken the highlight of the platform. So before we get into platform and I talk more about what you can do with Lambda test, let me just quickly brief you about what we are and what it is that we stand for. So Lambda test, as of now, it's a cross-browser test execution platform entirely based on cloud. And cross-browser testing, as we know, that you would want to test your website on different browsers because your customers can be visiting your website or web app from numerous different devices, right? You cannot control which device they're using to visit your website, but what you can control is how your UI is looking on different browsers. And having that kind of testing infrastructure is a hassle, because in many cases, say for example, if I have a Windows machine, it will be difficult for me to test my website on say a Safari browser. And if I have a Mac machine with me, I cannot test it on Internet Explorer. But and I cannot just, it's not feasible for individuals to go out and buy different devices and create their own device lab. And even if you have your own device lab, it can turn out to be very taxing in terms of your DevOps bandwidth, because you need to constantly maintain the devices that needs to be added. Every month there are new devices rolling out, and it becomes pretty taxing to actually keep a tab on the existing testing infrastructure and add on to it, maintain it at the same time. And that's where we come in. We provide you a cloud-based test execution platform with ready-to-fire machines, so you can come up and figure out from 3,000 plus browsers combinations and just open up any browser or operating system combination and figure out how your website, web app, or even mobile app is looking. What we have at Lambda Test as of now is an automation testing grid for Selenium. Similarly for Cypress, we also have Appium testing. We have live interactive testing, which is basically you get to insert your website's URL and you can manually test how the web application is rendering and how it's performing on different browsers and operating systems. We also have a very handy utility. I would say it's called LT Browser, and it's extremely impressive. It allows you to debug and build mobile web apps and mobile websites almost 2 times faster, because you can debug and view how the website is looking on 2 different devices or more at the same time. It's free to download utility, so by all means go ahead and try that. We also offer a full page comparison of screenshots, so you can actually capture full page screenshots of your website in different browsers and can compare them to see if there is any visual anomaly that's happening due to cross-browser issues. We have 600,000 trusted global users all around the globe. We're using the platform. We have 100 plus product integrations. We love to help, so we are always available 24/7 to help you with anything around the platform or testing in general. We do offer a lifetime product access, so in case you have not tried Lambda Test, by all means feel free to go ahead and sign up. It's free to use. One thing that we have recently launched, and I'm actually super pumped to announce that it's one of our latest offering when it comes to test execution, and we call it Hypertest. And with Hypertest, you can actually accelerate your test scripts up to 70 times faster than in comparison to executing them on traditional cloud-based systems. You can go ahead and figure out and just drop us a message. I would not want to deep dive further into Hypertest as of now, but it's a very exclusive offering, and it's pretty innovative because it actually allows you to test runs in a jiffy. And I say it in a jiffy, I mean that it can match up to your local test execution speed while giving you a cloud-based test execution experience. So make sure to just give us a shout in case you want to know more about it. And having said that, now let's dive into the dashboard. So as you can see, James had already configured an agent on the, I'm sorry if I'm not having the right jargon. James had already configured an agent on the Virtuoso, and which it had Lambda test, and he was able to trigger tests from there. And he had already mentioned about the parallel testing part, right? So we could see, so these are some of the tests that were already executed on my dashboard. And this is what the new dashboard is looks like. In case you have already tuned into Lambda test, we have recently upgraded our dashboard's UI experience in order to give you better analytics. This is what the old dashboard used to look like, but now we have optimized it in order to provide better analytical value and keep all the data under a single dashboard, right? So you have all your builds, which are mentioned over here. Every test case that gets executed within that build gets highlighted over here. And once you open any of these test cases, you can actually look into the video recording, which James was just pointing out, that one of the astonishing part about Lambda test is that every test you run over our platform, you can actually declare a capability a video capability, if you set that to true, you'll be able to record your entire test execution. So everything that happens within a browser gets recorded on the platform. And this really helps to, eliminate the tug of war which happens between QA and the dev teams every time a bug which is difficult to reproduce happens to be there, right? Where QAs are like, it's not happening in my system, or it is happening in my system, and vice versa. On the other side, devs are denying that because they're not able to reproduce that. So having this kind of video recording in place, in check all the time, really helps you to prove your point. And what's really interesting is you can capture a lot of logs on Lambda test while executing your test cases. And one of the sections that you can highlight is the command log. And within the command log, you can act every time frame where a command gets executed is highlighted there as a part of the video. So you can actually click on a particular command and the timer will shift to that particular second where that command is being executed. So you can figure out, okay, this is what's happening at this end, maybe this is why it's happening, or this is why it's breaking. Yeah. And apart from command logs, there are network logs, which can help you capture your network responses for all the media elements, CSS, JavaScript, and all the image and other inputs on the network front. You can figure out how your application is behaving on different networks. And then there are raw Selenium logs to help you debug anything if you wish to deep dive into raw Selenium logs, you can get that. And there is console logs. These are basically the logs that you get from your developer tools. So every browser that gets running over here, these logs are directly fetched from the developer tools of that particular browser. So you can see exactly what's spinning up and why it's breaking and what kind of console you're rendering once your tests are being executed on the platform. There are terminal logs in case you wish to capture a terminal log. You can do that from here. I have kept it false as of now, but you can leverage Lambda Test API in case you want to capture your terminal logs as well. So having said that, this is what you can do from here. There is a lot of information on the platform. You can figure out the metadata, which talks about everything, be it your test ID, test name, which browser was used, which operating system, what was the screen resolution, timestamps, and other areas. One thing I would like to highlight is we have actually worked pretty hard recently in order to show better analytical information when it comes to executing test cases. And this is something which we have isolated, so you could have a better insights on the overall number of tests that gets executed. And you can narrow these down based upon these filters. So you can actually figure out, okay, this is how your Cypress builds are performing, or how your Selenium builds are performing. And you can narrow them down. If you scroll down, you will find an ample amount of information, which can help you figure out, okay, these are the type of tests which were run on so-so operating systems and so-so browsers, right? If there are any errors, in my case, there are not, touch wood, but if you do come across any errors, you will be able to find them in your error insights, and they will be highlighted with the ample amount of information for you to help debug that particular issue. We do have resource utilization segregated now, so you can actually figure out in your organization how many concurrent sessions or how many parallel sessions were being fired by your users at which time frame, right? So as you can see, 2 parallel sessions were fired on this day itself in my organization. Speaking of organization, you can narrow these tests down based upon the person who executed the test. So in my organization, there are 2 folks, it's me and Idan. And if I were to select Harshit Paul, all the tests that were executed by me will be reflected here. You can clear all of these filters, and there's a lot on the platform which you can deep dive and figure that out. I would not like to get into it as of now, but by all means, feel free to give it a spin. And in case you have any questions or any doubts, we would love to help you. And I will just hop on back to the slides now, because I guess I just want to be a little more sensitive towards the time right now. So yeah, in case you've not yet signed up on the Lambda Test platform, by all means, go ahead and do it. We give 100 minutes of automation testing absolutely free. So and you will have a lifetime access to the product. So go ahead and give it a shot and let us know how it works. We really appreciate user feedback. We have worked out a lot of improvements on the product based upon the feedback we have received from users. So give it a spin, let us know how you find it, and we would be happy to have your feedback on the platform.
Right. Thank you
Let's
very much.
step into the Q&A. Yeah.
Actually, Harshit, the great thing is we've got a few more things to show on Virtuoso.
So yeah, I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
I forgot we wanted to cover the reporting part.
I know we've got so much to cover. It's fantastic, but it's all great stuff. And I must say, I absolutely love Lambda Test in terms of just, I mean, for me, it's just super easy to integrate. Then being able to execute on any operating system or device is just, it's absolutely awesome. So that's fantastic. So
I have a hard time passing my mic to anybody else, but I'm so sorry about that, James. By all means,
no, yeah, that's absolutely fine. So, really what we're interested to build is that there's just even more goodness, because actually, if you think about it, when the BDD is not just about building tests, it's not just about writing them and then executing the test and great, just forget about them. The point is actually that when you do execute the tests, I mean, it's really important to obviously, all the great things that Harshit was showing on Lambda Test in terms of being able to view executions and drill in. It's, that's really important. But there's a couple of other aspects, which are, firstly, to be able to ensure that because it's automation, pretty much all of us know that with automation, there's a tendency for it to break when things change. So what we really sort of have done at Virtuoso is to ensure that it's not just about writing the first test and making sure that runs, but to ensure every time it does run, that you're able to have basically what we call self-healing, to self-maintain those tests, even if, let's say, an element ID might dynamically change, as we know they have a horrible habit to do so. So at the same time as, obviously we've got the great insights you get from Lambda tests for executions. In Virtuoso, what's also happening behind the scene is we're basically sharing the traffic to be able to say, we're benefiting from the execution on Lambda test in this case, to run it on those operating systems and devices, but then to feedback insights that we can also help to sort of, firstly, report on tests, but also help us to ensure that we can automatically keep tests running for longer, even with dynamic changes. Firstly, as the test execute for every single test step, you've obviously got little indicators to say these have all passed. I mean, this is my automated test that I ran based on BDD and everything's passed. Fantastic. For those, I get sort of further insights, as well as the great videos you get on Lambda Test. I've got screenshots so I can actually check my test, what it was actually going against. So that's for every single step. But then behind the scenes, we're also surfacing, because when we execute on Lambda Test, we're exploring at the DOM level to discover the elements, just using this natural language, and that's happening immediately. We're then surfacing all the available selectors, so the IDs, the XBAR, CSS, and so on, to be able to build automatically the model of the elements. So without you having to put down a single line of code or write an XBAR or an ID, we capture all of those automatically. And what that actually means is that, I mean, great, you've built the model, so now it sort of more accurately ensures that you identify, but also have those insights for an element. But additionally, you also have where, even though the first time it's running, I'm just using this hint, the label I see on screen, this quantity label here. The second time I run, and every time they're on, we're now using the full model of the element. And if you've got dynamic IDs, or someone updates the class name, or they changes the location, so the XPath moves, it could be the actual label changes. We then use what we call self-healing, which is basically to say, as the test is executing, running on Lambda Test, in Virtuoso, we are basically comparing to say, with the previous model of the element, with all the selectors captured, if we can see using algorithms, we can probabilistically determine, has there been a change? In this case, there has, but we can still, with confidence and awaiting, say, is it the same element? We will self-heal that as the test is running. And this works for pretty much any sort of change. It's not limited to an XPath or ID. It's literally anything that's changed in the model of the element. So long as we can identify it is the same element, then we heal that automatically at the speed of the application as it's running. So it basically takes away those issues. I mean, I'm sure you've all experienced sort of flaky automation tests where the XPath changes, it breaks, and then you spend hours sort of debugging what's gone wrong. This is happening automatically as the test is running. So it just ensures from that test maintenance aspect that the tests are really robust, but also you can write much longer tests, all in natural language, because you now know that actually you don't have to worry about test breaking if they get too long. You can absolutely do those. You can also, if you remember, we ran this test, we did it in parallel, but also we used test data. So if we actually go now to our project activity for the test that we ran, which I think was this one here, the regression pack, then we can see, actually, if I come back across, let's pick the right one, which was, I think this one here, my 5 journeys that I've run. Here we go. So you can see here for the test that I did, my write and automated test in BDD, it's now actually executed 3 times. And it's done that because we use test data. So where we have our form down here, remember, we did this at the, before development, we mapped in test data. And in this case, you can see I've used 𝒂𝒏 𝒂𝒏𝒕 We've used Harshit's email in the second test. We've used Ryan's in the third, and we did that for the names as well. We've actually used test data, which was mapped into a codeless test written from BDDs. And then we can view each of the execution outputs for each of those test data scenarios. It's from a reporting perspective, it's fantastic. But then you can also go in and get very clear visibility in this test. Well, pretty obvious, I wrote a bug, but imagine this was a bug. The key thing here is that as the test runs, think about the purpose of BDD is to say join together so product development testers can all combine to design, develop, and test. But also if this fails, then a developer can come in and see, well, I can see where it failed and I can read the test so I know what was happening. I can see the screenshot. The tester can see exactly the same thing, but now a business owner, a product person who may just literally work on the concept of visuals or how I see it, they can also read exactly where it went wrong. So they can see which test failed and where, with real insights to be able to capture that. But then also, in addition to the great insights you're capturing in Lambda test, we've also got additional information which you can sort of never have too much insights as long as they're really sort of transparent and readable. We provide our root cause analysis to be able to give you the entire page source at the time the test was running. We give you also the page network, more look towards the failed test step, which you can drill into. So between Lambda test and Virtuoso, you've really got those insights. And the page console logs to be able to drill into, all in context of that codeless automated test that was created. So in addition to sort of, think about reporting for any of those sort of 3 amigos, it's, really, really easy. And think about it, this is immediate. I wrote my test before development. I launched from CI/CD. So at the minute the code was ready, I can see exactly if there's a bug, I need to get it fixed, do that, and then release and retest. That's exactly the model of BDD, the cycle. And the great thing here, that question Ryan put, when do we do this? As soon as possible, as soon as the BDD is done. And in this case, as soon as the code is ready. And then finally, just to call out that in addition, think about where we started in all of this. We built our project, we imported our requirements. So back to the requirements, we can see our test is covered by a regression pack, a goal, and we can trace that back with 100% traceability for success because my automated test succeeded. And if I'm a product owner, I want to say, can I check you actually did map that? Great, I can read each of the test step, max back to those BDDs. So we're building the right thing in the right way, testing it at the right time, maximum efficiency, speed for everybody, so that between Virtuoso and Lambda test, you're going to be able to just push out the best quality applications as soon as possible, which is what we're all here for. So hopefully that's been really insightful. And what I'll do is just bring back up the presentation here. I think if I can just bring it into the slideshow. So as Harshit sort of, gave the great insights into, let's face it, go and Google Lambda test, go and Google Virtuoso, but there's our website. We'd love for you to come and visit. And both Ryan, myself, and the rest of the sales and sales engineering team would love to talk to you, virtuoso.qa. So please do reach out. Same as with Lambda test, please do reach out. We'll both be really pleased to hear from you. Otherwise, I think we can move on, Harshit, now to
Q&A. Yeah, and John and Mihir were just applauding about how informative and practical this session was. And we're so glad you liked it. And I'm pretty sure the audience is getting a lot of information. So we do have a question from Mihir. It says, hi, Virtuoso supports which all testing types of these web, mobile, API, desktop, and Oracle Forms web?
Yes, it's a great question. So actually Virtuoso, we're focused on, so we've chosen to start with browser-based testing. So, and the reason we've done that is just because for us, it's just such an incredibly important place. Plus, you know, so many people have got so many web applications that need testing. So browser-based testing, that can be both on public networks, private networks. We have a bridge tunnel to create secure TLS tunnels that you can test on private networks, incredibly secure. We run it in enterprise environments. So mainly functional end-to-end testing, but we also have a fantastic API manager that lets you easily build APIs and embed those into your functional tests. So you could be doing a digital transformation project with microservices, APIs, could be doing a front end to back end with API testing. You can do that with Virtuoso. As well as if you go to our site, we've got some great insights around visual regression testing. So we test from mainly the functional end-to-end API and visual regressions for any web-based application, including front-end websites, or it could be SAP for HANA, Salesforce, ServiceNow. That's pretty much the scope of what we're covering. Hope that helps.
And Oracle.
Thank you.
And
And
we
I
also
think
have another
what I'd like to add
Is the-
there is that it's all from a true the end-to-end. It's taking functional, combining them with API and visual regression to give the truest reflection of user journeys. I think you'd agree with me there, James. It's all about making them as much like a user would use your site as possible.
Absolutely, I agree, Ron. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and I believe we have a follow-up question from it. In fact, we have two follow-up questions. So the first one is, what is the background language? Can we do background scripts to extend experience QE, example Java, etc., and use POM model? Yeah, so what we have in Virtuoso, we're trying to enable pretty much the majority of testing to be done with natural language. But we do appreciate there will be scenarios where you have a special little thing you want to be able to test, and we have that very commonly. So I want to be able to maybe test that a table contains a certain number of values, and therefore, we'll probably do that in natural language one day. But today, we enable you to extend Virtuoso with little JavaScripts that you can build into Virtuoso and then execute as part of your test. It could be JavaScript expressions. It could be an expression to create a date that you're going to use into your tests, or it could be to actually perform a function, including taking variables that you map into that or export from that. So the answer is yes, you can export, use JavaScript extensions. The majority of the test, however, you will find you'll be able to write in natural language. And actually for Virtuoso, we spent a good 2 years building this out with our own proprietary logic. So we've made it incredibly robust in terms of the programming language behind this. But yes, you can extend this out with JavaScript. All right, and then the next question is more about, as many people find BDD to be, bandwidth, stingy on the bandwidth front, right? So what happens if the requirements are constantly changing? Does adding more BDD files, will it update the test scripts automatically, and how does that work? Yeah, so actually what we find in practice, so we have had where both we can, try and leverage the changes from BDDs and map them in, but actually what we find is that the speed at which to author tests typically means that while we have worked with customers who tried to sort of dynamically have it updating where the requirements sort of adjust, sometimes it's actually easier to go and rewrite the test from the new BDDs because it's so quick and easy to do so and make sure you've got a valid test. You could go into your tests and update the BDDs. And we're going to continue to obviously refine out based on how actually BDDs are utilized, which that's one of the biggest things we find is different people are using in different ways. And to Ryan's point, looking at the standardization of BDDs is really going to help them come up with those type of capabilities. But genuinely at this stage, the speed at which, as you saw for us authoring a test, if there's constantly changing BDDs and requirements, which then mean there's a new development, you can certainly leverage portions of the test. So you could say my first part, my login stayed the same, and then it's the second part. So you could reuse and embed the BDDs just for the change part, or it's so quick and easy to rewrite them at this stage. But of course, we're just continually developing. So as we find that method to standardize and update, we'll be sure we'll be putting it in.
Yeah, I think the other thing to say there, James, is we don't live in a perfect world, so things do change. But the fact that you can get those requirements in so early and build a test structure that the business can look at means that they shouldn't change. So we're I mean, I know that, I know people are probably raising some eyebrows there, but there's also the fact that you're getting them in there so early and ensuring that they're testable and written correctly, that they shouldn't change. I appreciate that might not be a perfect world that we live in.
Yeah, and I believe the sooner we get them into, the more we're able to actually look into the depth of the entire application. I mean, it's just about shifting left. The sooner you can do it, the less it's going to cost and the faster you can get it done. So yeah, all hands on that one. So I'm pretty impressed. Mahir seems to be a pretty powerful user for both the platforms. He's saying that, he's already used LT browser and it's an amazing utility. However, for some reason, it is making some API call to Lambda test due to some security reason, and it's getting blocked. Unfortunately, Mahir, I'm not technically sound to answer this question in the right manner, but what I would recommend is just drop us a message on the chat. We are 24/7 available, and our devs are pretty responsive, and I'm pretty sure they can have a look at what kind of issue it is that you're facing and why is it getting blocked. I mean, it is required to log into Lambda test in order to use LT browser, but just drop us a message and we'll be happy to hop on a screen share if required and get that resolved for you. And then thanks for using LT browser and the platform in such great detail. Yeah. All right. Cool. So any other question that you guys, any other questions that the audience would want to throw at us? I believe Mihir is prompting on the LT browser front. Happy to help, Mihir. Just drop us a message. Thanks. Cool. I think Ryan, James, you pretty much nailed it. I mean, that's what happens when I have panelists who have decades of experience with them. I don't think the audience have any more questions. I guess we got everything we needed in order to accelerate the test cycle and test delivery and ship faster. I guess a lot of learning. I got to learn a lot of fun stuff when it comes to BDD. Virtuoso seems to be a pretty handy utility. Maybe I'll give it a shot pretty soon. Just try to rub my hands on the entire webinar again and do a step-by-step with everything that you two have demonstrated. Love the slides, Ryan. Hats off. I'll pick up your brain sometimes, maybe when I'll need the presentation to be done on my front too. I would love to catch up your brain on that front. And thank you so much for everyone who has joined us. It was great having you here from all around the globe. And thanks a lot for joining in. James, Ryan, would you want to bid farewell to the audience? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so thanks. Decades of experience. Obviously, James has that, but the young fella such as myself is not quite into his decades yet. But thank you for having us. We have got a new in-app help now. So if anybody's wanting kind of those technical questions that clearly we're not capable of answering at this moment, you will be able to find in the docs, in the changer log, new ways to contact us with immediate feedback from within the application itself. Thank you for having us. I really, really enjoyed it. We got a lot of ship done there, which is obviously what Virtuoso loves to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I echo that. Look, thank you very much, guys. And anything you'd like to know about either platform, reach out to virtuoso.qa or Lambda Test. And yeah, we'd love to hear from you. So yeah, thank you very much and have a good rest of the morning, afternoon or evening. And we'll speak again. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone. Bye-bye. Happy testing.